Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously, zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar. Zero patience for slow walkers. Those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night. Have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Are you on Substack? Because I am, and I'd love to connect with you there. I process things there over Saturdays and Sundays, days off, sometimes weeknights as I'm researching and reading other articles, and it inspires me to write things where I'm going deeper into the behind the scenes of what some of the episodes on A World of Difference are all about. I'd love to connect with you there. So if you are on Substack, find me. You can go to loriadamsbrown.substack.com as a free, or I would prefer a paid subscriber, because then you get access to more of the in-depth things that are exclusively for my paid subscribers. I keep my prices as low as they can be on Substack, as low as they allow. But I do believe in being paid for my work, and I believe you should be paid for yours too. So join me there and let's make a difference together. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Welcome back to A World of Difference. Today, we're going to talk about something that every single one of us needs more of. It's courage. Not the movie version of courage. I'm talking about the kind of courage that it takes to raise your hand in a meeting, to challenge the status quo at work, to lead when the stakes are sky high, and to choose values over comfort when the easy road would be to just stay quiet. And my guests today, they have lived this. Kristen Cavanaugh is the founder and CEO of the Agency Initiative, and for nearly 6 years, she was the Senior Director of Inclusion, Talent, and Learning at Tesla. She's also a veteran, a Naval Academy grad, and served as vice chair at the Department of Defense's first ever advisory committee on diversity and inclusion. Her work is all about helping leaders and organizations step into their most courageous moments. Joining her is her business partner and co-founder, Michael Randolph, COO of the Agency Initiative. Mike led talent experience at Yeti and also shaped leadership development at Tesla. With more than a decade of experience coaching senior leaders, he's obsessed with building people-first cultures that don't just survive uncertainty, they thrive in it. Together, Kristen and Mike are pulling back the curtain on what it really was like and what takes place when you lead with courage in today's workplace and in today's world. And trust me, this conversation is going to challenge you to think differently about how you show up at work right now, in your community, in politics, in your faith spaces, with your neighbors, with your family, around dinner tables, around boardroom tables, and in your life, because courage is needed in all of these spaces. And if you've heard me say this before, you know that I believe it wholeheartedly. We don't have to agree on everything. No one does. We don't all speak the same languages. We don't all come from the same cultures. We don't all believe in the same faith and religion. And yet, working together and bringing those differences around the table is how we make a difference together. We must learn to lean into these conversations, listen to each other so we understand each other, especially when we disagree and especially when it's uncomfortable. So today's conversation is going to dig deep, I'm telling you, but you're not going to want to miss it. So let's dive in. Hello, Mike and Kristen. It's really great to see you. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and thanks for showing up today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here and know there's a lot of overlap between your community and the folks that we're talking to. So this is going to be a great conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited about it. Here, we love to go deep in conversations. We don't shy away from difficult conversations. Some people say, especially in our world today with all the geopolitical shifts, especially talking politics and religion are off the table. They're not off the table for us. We really believe here, even as sometimes in corporate spaces, especially where there are secrets that get held. And sometimes those things that we don't talk about can actually be what holds companies and talent management spaces back from being who we actually could be, because some of those things that we're told not to talk about, if we could, with some skills around emotional intelligence and, just respecting one another and our opinions, really could move the needle forward for our companies and organizations globally. And I think that that's sort of the topic we're going to address a little bit today. A trigger warning for anybody who's had any sort of experience in a toxic work environment. If you're a survivor of a toxic boss, or some systems that were discriminatory or really harmed you in some severe ways, just a warning for you that this conversation will involve some of that. But what we're going to talk about today are some ways to move forward. We're not just going to mention the hard things. We're going to also talk about some tools and strategies on how to make our workplaces work better for everyone so that we bring out the best in each other and we really listen to understand each other and really respect each other with dignity. And that's really something we need to see more of in our workplaces today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the writing and this book that you guys have worked on together, some of your shared experiences, Kristen and Mike. And so my first question right out the gate here is for you, for Kristen. I want to know, how do you see fear showing up in leaders and organizations today?
First of all, thank you again for having us. We're really excited about the conversation. I mean, we see fear as an unfortunate constant that is happening in our workplace, not just on the people side, but from an operational side. Fear seems to be everywhere, unfortunately. It's like you can't escape it. And so from a leadership standpoint, we kind of think of it as an inner game and outer game. So there's some of the fear of like, am I going to lose my job? Am I doing good enough work? All of the what's the next riff that's going to happen? Like there's so many external factors in like the outer game of how people experience work. Then there's all the internal fears too. Am I good enough? Am I showing up? What if I'm not the leader that I hope to be? And so you've got leaders that are, or employees that are experiencing this from every single angle. And it seems that we're just inundated with a fear. And so what Mike and I hope to do is, one, name it, that it's
Mhm.
not something that is just happening to you, but it's happening to all of us. So then that way we can turn around and say, all right, now that we understand, I'm afraid to fail, I'm afraid to get fired, I'm afraid of the next geopolitical nightmare that's going to happen, then we can come up with ideas about how we're going to address it and how we're going to move forward.
Yeah, and I totally relate to that. I kind of wonder also, Mike, what has your experience been around some of that? And maybe even this question is a good one. Is there a difference between sort of fear-driven leadership and courageous leadership, which is what you're writing about in the book?
Yeah, I mean, we've had direct experience with it, right? From our experience working together at Tesla, it was a very much an environment where we experienced what can you do for me today, or what did you do for me today? Meaning that today was enough, but tomorrow better be the same, or more, and more, and you kept going and going like that. So like that's an environment where every day you worry, am I going to get fired today? Am I going to get publicly called out by my CEO? Is my program that I'm working on going to be the center of attention where it's going to be very deliberately called out? So that's some of the constant fear that we experienced specifically while working at Tesla. In that though, there's fear-based leadership, meaning that it's a tool that a leader uses to control, manipulate all of that. And then there's the fear-based leadership in the sense that it creates an environment of fear where I am afraid to do things because I don't know how my boss is going to respond. I don't know how the environment is going to respond. I don't know how it's, and so there's an uncertainty. And we titled the book, Harness the Power of Agency to Lead in Uncertain Times, because I think uncertainty is at its highest right now. And it's happening faster and faster. We're seeing change and uncertainty come out as more and more. So there is a very difficult moment that we're in right now, not just in the workplace, but in society, that is really guided by just this constant undertone of fear. And so the fear-based leadership really, again, comes from those two parts. And what we're asking of individuals and what we're asking of folks really to do is how do you find courage in those moments of fear? How do you know that you can have courage in those moments? We call that very specifically in the book, but there's this concept of agency. Everyone has agency in a moment of fear. You can always make a decision based on your values, whatever that decision could be. But there's always some decision that you can make based on your values, and that's really that technical piece, that one thing that you can say, okay, I can finally breathe and take a moment to understand what that agency is, to actually make a decision that overcomes that situation of fear, that moment of fear.
And I think too, Mike, with that, you can't control what your CEO is doing. Maybe you can't
Absolutely.
control what
Yeah.
your boss is doing, but what you can do is find the agency that you personally have and the courage
Yeah.
to make the right decision for you. And so that's what we're asking people. Like, I think that's what, we couldn't control Elon's tweets. We couldn't control like what was happening. And that feels helpless a lot. And it's scary a lot. But what you can do is find those like micro moments where you can take little steps that get you closer and closer to your values. And that's what we're asking people to do. Like, not take monumental big steps toward courage, but what are those micro moments where you can take steps every single day that bring you closer and more in alignment with your values?
What, Kristen, something you said there a second ago, I think it's really important to call out too, because those things that we can't control about our bosses. There's a those decision making moments spread like wildfire, unfortunately. And so when you talk about a fear based environment, then as well, you have the modeling that comes from someone who, like an Elon, that is modeling what that fear based leadership looks like, that others pick up on, that is then becomes permanent with, or permeates throughout an organization, permeates throughout a federal government, if you will, to where again, like you see people adopting the 5 bullets or the 3 bullets or whatever that is, like that you don't know how someone's going to interpret that. You don't know how someone's what they're going to do with that information. And if you're giving it to them every week, every day, all of that, then that just builds the undercurrent of fear within your organization and frankly within our society right now.
Yeah, there's so many things going on inside work, outside of work, as we sit here in the United States. Silicon Valley is at the heart of a lot of this. Where Tesla headquarters is. We're very familiar here in the Bay Area. Many of us have friends who have worked there over the years, and friends who own Teslas that suddenly decided, "Ooh, do I need to put a bumper sticker on the back of my Tesla that says I bought this before Elon, and now I can't sell it because it's now you've sunk your money into it." And so there's a lot of people that have a lot of cognitive dissonance around just owning them and whatever. Everybody makes their own decisions. And I think we're in an environment right now. You mentioned politics here in the United States. I know we're not alone. There are some geopolitical global shifts that are happening, but there is a lot of attention on us here in the US because of the relationship between Elon Musk, a big Silicon Valley billionaire, alongside the president of the United States, and how, things happened around the election. All business and politics have been intertwined in ways that have not really been so obvious before. And so I think that when it comes to, even things such as the First Amendment right, the right to say what you believe, what you think, is now at risk. There's a lot of concern around talk show hosts, for example, Stephen Colbert. There's a lot, there's predictions about other things starting to roll out, and things that we're starting to see happen. But I think that even in the workspace, whether you have a leader, Elon might be a more extreme example, but there are other leaders that are feeling outside of work, the things they post on social media, and they may not be at all related to their work, but people are feeling scrutinized about what they say. It's an odd thing because you have a leader such as who we have in the White House saying, very disturbing and outlandish, very disrespectful things on social media and having a lot of fawning and that type of thing going on. And then you have leaders such as Elon doing this and maybe others along those lines. But then people who seem to be really good people are often the ones that are getting ousted or scrutinized or framed in a certain way. What have you seen around that? Because there is so much fear, not only that the First Amendment right will be taken away, but that what you do outside of work, your hobbies, your religion, your life, your thoughts that have nothing to do with work are being scrutinized.
I think the first thing is that we are not in normal times. And so I think that's a piece of it. Like, we can't normalize anything that is happening right now because it is not normal. to have your personal words used against you, or to have your religion used against you, or your gender identity used against you in the workplace. Like, this is not normal. And so I think that's been part of the problem. Like, it has become normalized. What Mike was kind of talking about, and what we saw at Tesla, is like, you see this behavior happen, and then you start to conform to behavior that goes against your values in every sense, because it's what's happening. And like, I don't want to give everybody a pass, but we talk about it in terms of like accidental authoritarians in the book. Like, you have these people who are just going along with what is happening. And what I'm afraid is we're going to wake up someday and realize that, like, we've gone along to some really crazy stuff. And so that's one of the reasons that we are having this call to action right now, is to say, like, we've got to stop before we go too far. I mean, I thought it was funny, not funny. I was looking at a tweet that Elon sent the other day, and he sent it last year, but it was like, if anybody is fired because of what they say on this platform, I'll pay for your attorneys. Well, that wasn't in response to what happened last week. That was into response to something else. And so, Kara Swisher rightfully pointed out, like, we've got some people who might need your help. And so there seems to be this idea that it's okay for some, it's not okay for others. And so I think what we're asking for is here, how do we just stop normalizing any of this and just have the conversations that you were talking about? Like, we may not disagree or we may not agree, like, that's okay, but how do we just take it down so much that we can agree that this is crazy and we have to stop before we go too far? And you can't post what you want. You can't have a TV show that says, where the host says what once was a joke or what once was satire, that is now getting them fired or canceled, or an entire TV station shut down. I think we're just in really slippery slope, and we need people to come forward and say, this is enough and we've got to stop before we go too far.
We're seeing really good examples of that, though, Kristen. Like, you and I were sending notes back and forth about Jerry from Ben and Jerry's. He resigned this week, right? And because his organization, I can't remember the specifics, but I think it's an example, again, where leaders are actually speaking out against what they're experiencing in their workplaces. And again, what they're again, pushing back against what is trying to be normalized right now. And so it's not all doom and gloom in that sense, but it is there that you need those examples. You need those people to lead the way. Now, he had an extreme place, like he's coming from a place of privilege, excuse me, where like he was a CEO of a company, he sold that company, like there's obvious stake that he has, and he's be able to put himself in that position. But we have to have those examples of leadership as well. What good leadership looks like, what good culture can look like. Marriott CEO did an interview right after some of the executive orders around diversity were released, and he said, I'm summarizing and calling back from memory now, but he said something along the lines of like, we serve people and meet people where they're traveling. We want all people to come through our doors, and our company is going to be representative of those people. Something along those lines. Like, that's the type of leadership that we can lead by example in service of actual business goals as well. So I think there are those examples out there that help us see what the other side can be like. There's just not enough of that right now.
Yeah, honestly, to me, it's bad for business. The First Amendment right is actually very good for business because, look what's happened to Target even. We mentioned Tesla, but several people, because of their DEI board decision, and I would say people that shop at Target often are also people who shop at Costco. Well, many of us have been like, hey, I'm Costco all the way now, and sorry, Target. And until they sort of figure that out, that, we don't live in a homogeneity society. Like, we're not homogeneous. We haven't been for many hundreds of years. And so to pretend that all of a sudden we are, like, what would that person even look like? And that's a very small customer base that you're trying to appeal to. Who is your ideal customer after all? If you're only trying to sell to a certain type of person, it doesn't make good business sense. It's actually a huge risk management conversation. It's very risky for business. But also on a talent development perspective, we see that fear, people walking around with lizard brain, they're not productive, they're not innovative. You're not getting the best out of your employees when they're living in fear. Right. And if they're
No,
living in fear, both politically, if they're afraid of, we have, and I'm in California, like near Tesla, ICE raids are, these are things that people are afraid of, whether you feel as though you're at risk or your colleagues on your team that you work with and you do great work together. Nobody wants to see that happen. And I'm not just referring to, people who may not have documents. I'm talking about my Latino friends who were born and raised here, who are US citizens that are also afraid and also get picked up. And these are real stories. So there's a lot of fear outside of work. And then if we create it inside work, people have nowhere to go. This is not good for humans. It's not good for productivity. If your goal, if your outcome you're looking for is a highly productive team and workforce, this is not the formula that gets you there. I'd love to hear you share a moment when when courage actually helped you move through fear and uncertainty, if one of you might want to share one of those.
I mean, I'll talk just a very practical one to what you were saying. So, when COVID started, I had a staff of like 10 or 15 people or so, a lot of parents with young kids. And so out of the blue, we've got all these parents with young kids. There's no vaccines. The world is shutting down. And I could see it on Zoom in my staff, right? I could see the fear. And in what became a tradition for our team, one week I was like, we're gonna throw the agenda out the window. How are you guys doing? Just like recognizing that people were not at their best. And it was just word vomit from everybody about their parents, about their kids, about their colleagues who they'd gone to school with. And so I realized in that moment that you can't just keep pushing and pushing and pushing people. You've got to start recognizing the humanity. And to your point, there is no space for relief, especially during that time during COVID. And so, as a manager, you can offer the space. The time is yours to give and do with as you will. And so I think there are little things like that that leaders just don't think about sometimes, of like, just ask the person if they're okay. And then you're going to learn so much more about what is going on. And so that ended up becoming a tradition on our team. We would say we would GIF it up before every meeting. And so I would ask people how they were doing, and they would throw a GIF in the chat. And if like it was all dumpster fires, the agenda was going in the dumpster and we were going to chat. Mike knows because that's the one that we would get. We would get dumpster fires all the time. And so we were going to talk about the dumpster fire that was going on. So then we could get back to work afterwards. And so, I think there are a lot of times where leaders have to lean into and acknowledge what's going on with their workers and just give people space to talk and be human. And it goes a long way.
I love that. Brene Brown is one of the best leaders around some of this conversation, right? Just from where I sit here in Silicon Valley, everybody's using AI these days, and I use it. A lot of us use it for various reasons, but I think that keeping us in the driver's seat. I don't work in the automotive industry, but I still like the metaphor. If we're in the driver's seat, even if it's a self-driving car, we still get to make the decisions, the ethical decisions. What are we using this for? Are we losing our humanity? And we have to stay in that driver's seat. We have to still be engaged. We cannot just let it all be run by people who have manipulative strategic plans for their own self-interest. And those tend to not be good for business or humans at all. You don't have to choose profit over people. I'm a firm believer, and you will never convince me otherwise, that investing in your people, bringing out the best in their talent, understanding how humans work, which with all of our inventions in AI, we've never been able to change completely how humans are. There are certain things that are just timeless and true, whether you study sociology or psychology or biology or any of the intersection of those things. It's just true that when people are really stressed and a manager comes in and says, let's just name what we're feeling, that there is something very powerful about that. I do get concerned that we're outsourcing too much to managers in terms of that emotional load, especially in an environment where fear is constant. So I'd love for you to walk us through your agency loop and why courage is the essential fuel, another car word, although Tesla does not use the same kind of
energy,
fuel that keeps
power
it
source,
turning.
all of
Yeah,
it. Courage is at the center of it because we think in terms of like three core values for courage. We think in terms of curiosity, resilience, and trust. And so managers set the tone in how they act, both when they're internally represent those, but also how they show that to their teams. We talk about agency as being the focus point of this process, of this methodology framework. We really still haven't come up with it. The loop is what we call it. Because like that is that moment where action takes place, but it's also a moment of power that you can have in that situation as well. When we talk about the entry onto that, or how do you get started with it, really it happens in this moment of dissonance. There's something that happens in your world around you, a decision that you're faced against, or something that you experience that is at odds with your values, how you show up in the world. And when that happens, you feel a tension between that. It's a physical response oftentimes. Again, if you're talking about how we see fear in the workplace, it's, am I getting a pit in my stomach? Is it hard to breathe? Do I feel it in my shoulders? All those physical representations really drive, I'm experiencing this moment of dissonance. And so from that point, then you have to understand what are the things that are happening and what are the values that I have? Well, the starting point, or kind of the first part of the agency loop, is understanding yourself. And so we call that authenticity, taking the time to understand your own personal values, what they mean to you, but also what they mean and how you show up in the world. The next step after that is then taking some intention with that and making a decision based on those values. So do those values make it so that way you are going to decide one thing or the other? And how are you doing the calculus? That's all the risk, all of the challenge all of those factors that go into that decision, to know that you're going to come out on the other side with an intentional outcome. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be consequences. There's going to be unintended or unforeseen things that come up from it. And so that really comes into perspective in the growth phase. The growth phase is hard part of this. And I mean that because there could be some unintended consequences. There could be things that just you never imagined might have happened from that decision. But you still have to learn from it. You still have to appreciate that experience to then grow from it. And that can take, you can be in the moment, that can be years down the road too. And that's often what is very difficult for folks, is trying to come to terms with that. But then you turn that back into, okay, how am I going to show up the next time? And that's kind of like the loop function, right? And it takes us back into authenticity and start over and over again. It takes courage to sit with the discomfort throughout that entire process, looking at yourself in the mirror, making tough decisions, learning and growing from that experience. And so oftentimes what we see, again, are those underlying fears that stop people from doing one or more of those steps. And so, well, our hope with this loop is to give people something practical to anchor back to recognize where they're at in that process with a specific decision or instance, but also to give them, again, practical steps to take that next step in the loop to come back around. Where simple, it's 4 words, right? It's encourage, agency, authenticity, and growth. But like, hopefully that is a trigger to give people the opportunity to say, oh, cool, I know where I am, or at least I'm trying to understand where I am, and find themselves as part of that.
Love it. I feel like self-awareness is a key leadership core competency for right now and the future of work, for where we're going. There's so much happening very quickly. Ethical decisions, values-driven decisions are coming at us at lightning speed in ways that we've not experienced before as leaders. And so self-awareness is something that can feel as though a lot of courage is needed for some individuals, especially if you've had, maybe a traumatic childhood that you've not worked through yet in therapy. And I do encourage you to do so, because it not only holds you back in your leadership, but your entire organization, especially if you're at a CEO level and a founder and you're starting to build something. That work, it might feel scary to look inside. But not doing that, it's too risky. It's too costly. I just don't think you're going to be at the end of that years later looking back and saying that was a good decision, to be afraid of that and to let it hold you back. And so I just have a lot of compassion for that. But also, I've seen the leaders who do the work of self-awareness. I've done a lot of training on this. In fact, when I brought it up to a founder here in Silicon Valley in January, and had this conversation of how it's one of the 4 core leadership core competencies I see as part of the future of work is self-awareness. And his response is, I don't know many leaders here in Silicon Valley that are self-aware. It really is such a part of the work. And so I love that you're bringing this into your loop. But I know Tesla, like many companies here in Silicon Valley, was moving at lightning speed. I've been in these environments quite a bit, and many of us here are. Can you share how you had to cultivate one of these durable skills in that environment?
It's really difficult to do it on the fly, right? And so there's that acknowledgement piece of like, this is hard. That's why a lot of people don't do it. And so it is a practice. We have landed on that. It's like, this is something that you have to do day after day after day, and you're going to get better at it. So as we think about the loop, we see it not as just a cycle, but we called it the agency tornado. It's a terrible name for it, but
But it grows.
because it grows, like courage is growing over time, right? And so, and that's what you want to see is the more you run the loop, the easier it is to make decisions, the easier it is to get locked in on the values, the easier it is. And so, I think that's a big piece of it. At Tesla's, there was plenty of opportunities for us to like make decisions, learn, and grow. And there were some decisions we got right. There were some decisions we got wrong. One that I talk about in the book, and this was kind of the first one that I could pinpoint is like, "Ugh, that this is a rough one." Um, in 2020, I just stepped into the head of DEI role. Um, Pandemic had just started. George Floyd had just happened, and we were trying to figure out what our response was going to be. And so we were very early into our DEI journey at Tesla. And we had a lot of problems, as everybody knows, that we had a culture that needed to be fixed, right? And that had a lot of issues. And so one of the first options that was kind of thrown on the table of like what we could do to respond was to hang a Black Lives Matter flag off of the factory. And like, to Mike's point, like my heart just like sunk that like this is what we think we should be doing of all companies. Like we have problems and we are not the ones to be representative of like we say that we believe in Black Lives Matter. And so I felt like that was my first test of like, I could let this happen, or I could have the courage to say something and speak up as a Black woman about what that might feel like if we were the ones literally carrying that banner. And so I had a conversation with my boss about it, and she was like, "Yeah, you're right. Like that's probably not where we need to start." And so we thought about, well, what is authentic to us and where we are in our journey. And what was authentic to us in that moment was like, let's just learn. Because we haven't even taken the time to learn about our employees and learn what they're experiencing right now and learn what this means to them. And so we started this series called Listen to Understand. And we heard from all of our Black executives kind of came in and some of our Black employee resource group members to just talk to us and tell us like what they were feeling, what they were experiencing, and give people the chance to learn and listen in a way that typically companies aren't responsible for teaching their employees things like this, but it was a way for us to come together in a safe place, let people process and acknowledge where we were authentically in our journey. And so I think that's the thing. Like a lot of companies want to act like they've solved the DEI, kind of problem, and they're not even close. And people know that. Like that's when the performative, actions kind of come
Hmm.
out and folks get called out. So, I think it's looking at all of these opportunities where again, and you feel that tension and you know that you can do something about it. Like how are you really taking a risk and stepping in? I had worked for my boss for maybe a couple weeks. She was new to the role. I was
Hmm.
new to the role. And so really stepping in and just taking that one little tiny step of courage to have a conversation, which is what I love about what you were talking about earlier. We don't even have the conversations anymore. And so if we can just take a 1 minute and try to have a conversation with somebody that might be thinking differently or have a different opinion, maybe that gets us to a point where we don't do something dumb, like overrepresenting how we truly, are showing up as a corporation, and we do something that might feel a little bit more authentic.
Yeah, I saw so much similar to what you're saying. I've heard it in quite a few different companies from what happened around that time up until now. And I think that what we're seeing is the pandemic. You've mentioned the pandemic was a huge crisis for everybody in and outside of work. And then we had, in the United States, we had George Floyd. There have just been, it's poly crises. It feels as though there's not
Hmm.
been much of a break.
Yes.
And so I don't want to call it the new normal because I refuse to believe this is normal. There's nothing normal about it, but it is the climate. It is what's happening. So knowing that people just don't have a lot of margin, and especially if you're in a very fast-paced culture where your energy is waning and you can be a very resilient person, even from some of the generations that were taught that better than others. We have multiple generations in the workforce now. but no amount of bubble baths or boxes of chocolates are going to help you work through a burnout culture and a burnout society, right? I mean, there's just something else is required. And so I do believe that many companies have done what you're talking about, listen to understand courses, listening to understand people have called it different things. This is not a phrase that's unique to Tesla or anywhere else. It is a phrase that is so helpful to listen for what people are truly saying, the meaning behind the meaning. Some cultures do this better than others. The United States is not known for being one of the better ones, but in fact, we're kind of one of the worst on it, which is why we have to train so much on it in learning and development, in leadership development. A lot of DEI has been now, not only cut and changed and reformatted, reworded, but also just embedded into other parts of the company, which I would argue should have always been there anyway, because it shouldn't be a Band-Aid. It should be something that's from within and all the policies and procedures, and not just a value on a wall, but truly embedded into everything. And so therefore, some of the most basic skills of listening to understand, whatever your company called that course or calls it, I do hope that we're still leaning into some of that, because those who truly believed it and got it and understood it, I think that is the resilience building. I think that is how we move forward. And I do know that some people took those courses and it didn't mean anything and they didn't really absorb it. Maybe they weren't working in self-awareness for themselves. And there's no amount of training that will help somebody who's not learning, which I would say points to another key core competency right now, which is learning agility. If you're not able to continue learning in this environment about yourself, about your team, about how the world works, about how your company works, you're going to be left behind, and your company is too. So I want us to kind of, look towards some of that. Along those lines, as you've listened to understand others in your workforce across, differences in light of what's happening, how has courage helped you personally align your own personal values with how you lead in this current environment? Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, there's a reason why Chris and I are partners as part of this. We're very different people, right? I mean, just if you are not, you're not seeing this on video, but you're seeing, you're listening to us. Like, I'm straight, cis, heterosexual, male, white, lower than 40, thank goodness still. Really, like, I fit kind of the description, and Kristen is not any of that, right? And so we have this relationship that when we look at again, how we show up, like, I show up as someone who's willing to be uncomfortable in a conversation around these topics and model what that's like to be uncomfortable, because I'm uncomfortable a lot. Kristen can attest to that. But I'm also in the learning. I'm also willing to sit there and say, okay, I'm uncomfortable and I know that I might get this wrong and how I say it, but I'm willing to be wrong enough and listen to it to actually try to do something different. And that's one of the reasons why she and I have gelled so much over the course of our professional careers, is because I've been willing to do that. And I think seeing that in somebody, I'm starting to see it more and more from voices that are speaking out about their experience. But, like, that's what we need. We need people to model that, so that way somebody who is like me can see themselves in this work too, see themselves in this experience.
Think that's why curiosity is such a big part of the value of courage, is because we need people to have that curiosity about other people and their opinions and how they live their lives, and also that curiosity about themselves. And so we always continue to talk about this inner game and outer game. And so if you don't have that well-rounded curiosity, there's probably some things that you're missing. And so that is part of saying, like, look, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to go and learn. I'm willing to ask questions. I'm willing to be wrong. And I'm willing to change. And I think that's really like the call that we need right now. Are you being curious truly about people around you and about yourself and how all of this is coming together? And what are you willing to do about it?
That doesn't mean you have to
Love
abandon
that.
the parts of who you are that are mean so much to you, right? It doesn't mean you have to abandon convictions. It doesn't mean you have to abandon, we're still high performers. Like, we still get stuff done. Like, all of that is part of the culture that we bring, right, for this. But it does mean you just have to have that baseline curiosity and say, maybe I'm not right. Maybe there's something more I can learn in this world. And that opens the door to so many important conversations.
Yes, indeed it does. Honestly, it's just good for organizations of all types to be able to just bring our humanity, our differences. There's a lot of, I sit on the Silicon Valley Executive Board for How Women Lead. We do a Get on Board week every year. It's our biggest week of the year. We bring in women who are on corporate boards, women who are on their board journey, have a lot of conversations around this. But some of the statistics around this show that groupthink is actually very dangerous for boards, hence what happened with Target. It's dangerous because your customers are usually a diverse group of people, especially in a global company. Your companies sell products to moms. Well, it would be a good idea to maybe have a mom on your corporate board. Is it a bunch of men who've never bought a diaper and it's a company selling Pampers or what? I mean, I don't know. Nothing. I've never been on the Pampers board. I don't know who's on
Makes
their board, but
sense.
all that being said, all that being said, you need people who are representative, who understand your ideal customer in the business, really making these decisions every day. And then you need others outside of it who bring innovative ideas. I think there's this famous example. I think it was Nintendo. They brought a guy in who wasn't in the video game industry, but he understood games and he brought something really unique and different. And I want to say that's where maybe the Wii came out. Anyway, just something out of the box, like a whole
Possible. Yeah.
different way of doing something. There's so much value in that innovation, and you can't have the innovation without the ability to listen to each other and respect differences. You have to do that work of self-awareness to say, oh my goodness, somebody brought up an opinion that's different than mine. I adamantly disagree. If that triggers you to the extent that you need to build a case against that person and fire them or oust them, we're at real estate in California, you can just get rid of people for no reason. That's really such poor leadership. It's really dangerous for your business. I have worked throughout my career across the world with people with very different religious convictions from my own. I worked under Sharia law in Indonesia, wore hijab, didn't paint my fingernails, didn't drink alcohol or eat pork. These are not my values or convictions, but I could do that to do good work with others that I, maybe didn't agree on everything with, but we were humans and we could connect around those differences in really beautiful ways. I see that in Silicon Valley a lot. If you don't have those skills in leadership right now, here's your opportunity to lean into curiosity. So my next question for you is around that. Tesla is a global company with people from all over the world. What did it look like to engage across differences there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think your customer point is spot on here too. Like they sell Teslas around the world too, and so I think it really is listening to understand all of those different opinions. I used to joke there was a time where Elon was like famous for giving like nicknames to executives, like weird nicknames. And so
Master
my
of
boss,
coin and
yeah, like,
yeah.
yeah. And so my boss came back. I don't remember what hers was, like the tribute of the people or something like that. And I said, well, can mine be the Secretary of State? Because that's my job, is to understand like all of these different cultures that we have and everybody's desires and just make peace across all of these different lines, And I felt like that's what my job was. And I told her, I said, you know, none of us ever win. Like everybody is constantly losing, right? But we have to make sure that we're all losing together so that the company can win and move forward. And so I always joke that, I was the Secretary of State of Tesla because I was trying to keep the peace with all of these different kind of factions and cultures and understanding. And I really do think that help bring more innovative products to the table because you have to help people realize that one, we're here to work, and to get work done, we all have to work together. And so I think that was, my biggest kind of funny contribution was like, look, we're all going to lose, but let's at least lose in a way where we're not losing our humanity while we do it.
It's
I
interesting
love
you say
that. The
that too,
honest truth
because
is, good.
no, I was just saying like Tesla had something going for it that not every organization has, but I think a lot of organizations can learn from, or at least can key off of. In that, like Tesla had a mission that anchored people there. The mission was changing and saving the world. Not everybody's going to have that, right? But when those differences did come up, you could come back together and say, okay, we're here to do a job. We're here to do something that is meaningful, that everyone believes in. And there's leadership practices out there like the 5 dysfunctions of a team and crucial conversations. They all anchor back. What's the shared purpose that we're getting towards? Like what is that North Star? And that's not going to be as easy as saving the world, right? For every organization, for every team. But if you can have that there, then all of a sudden you can say, okay, I can understand perspectives from different places. Everyone can be heard. And then you figure out how to move beyond that or figure out how to work together. And that's really critical in team environments where there maybe is some contention or different perspectives that are butting heads with each other, because that anchoring, guiding light, again, it's easy to say it, it's harder to do in practice, but it is something that you can anchor back towards.
I love that. I'm a firm believer in that, even in toxic environments, or if you have a toxic boss, or maybe you're in a just really, really difficult situation, there are always glimmers. There are always good things. And it doesn't mean you should focus only on that in a toxic positivity way, but it means even, I don't know, a broken clock is right twice a day. I mean, there are always ways and places where you can agree. You know what I mean? And I do think that that's just the truth. And that's some of the nuance we've lost in a culture that wants to cancel people, oust people that disagree with them, fire people who are making us laugh about our culture on a regular basis, where everybody's fair game. If we've lost that, we've lost too much. We have to be able to respect each other, even when we disagree, and especially when we disagree, and that's leadership. So yeah, I really am so grateful that you brought out some of those glimmers. There are good things in Tesla. We hope that they increasingly lean into those things, and there are always opportunity to keep going forward and cultivating and putting more effort and fuel toward the good things, and really manage the parts that are toxic. And that's doable. Some strategic things would have to change in companies like this, but it's possible. And I think at the core of it is what you're saying, courage to do that. When you have fear and you have courage, they're opposed to each other. Some people would put fear and love. I think Tony Robbins mentions that, where they're opposites. But either way, you're either leaning into wholeheartedness, like Brene Brown talks about, or you're living in fear, and fear holds you back, holds your company back, holds your entire workforce back. This has been a very thoughtful conversation. I'm so encouraged about your book and where it's going to go and getting into the hands of lots of people. As we finish up here, where can people find both of you and find your book to read it?
Yeah, you can find us both on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with people. And so that's Kristen Kavanaugh on LinkedIn, Mike Randolph. You might be under Michael Randolph. We have a Instagram. You can find us on Instagram, Courage Over Fear book. You can find Mike Randolph official, Kristen Kavanaugh official. We believe in community, and we think the way that you build community is actually engaging with real people and having real discussions. And so if you want to talk to us, send us a DM. We love to talk about things. We'd love to connect with real people. And we think that's the only way that this community is going to thrive. And like the last thing I'll say is, like, we have hope, and we think that there is a better future. And so the way that we do that is through building community. So we look forward to connecting with you on Instagram, on LinkedIn. We hope you like the book.
You can get our book at courageoverfearbook.com as well. And that's our direct book website, and we'll have all the links to other places you can get it from there too. So if you're interested in that.
Yeah, well, everybody go out and buy the book and let us know what you think. Thank you to you both for being here today with us. Kristen and Mike, it's been a really intriguing, thoughtful, thought-provoking conversation, both with not shying away from the hard things, but also giving us tools toward building a better future of work. And I really appreciate you both. I'm going to invite you into our Patreon community in just a bit. We're going to talk about maybe a story from Tesla that stands out as a turning point for each of you in your leadership journey. So everybody join us there on patreon.com/aworldofdifference, and we'll join the conversation over there. Thanks once again to you, Kristen and Mike, for being on today.
Sorry.
What a powerful conversation. I felt it in my bones. I don't know if you did too, but Kristen and Mike just reminded us that courage is not some abstract idea. It's a choice. You and I face it every single day. And it's something that if we don't cultivate this courage, and if we don't allow it to be contagious with each other, I fear of what could happen to us as a society, in our workplaces, in our world. The moments that we are facing right now require so much courage. It's a choice. Not only do we face every single day and the way that we lead, but also the way that we speak and the way that we show up. Where are your values? Are they aligned? And when they're not, what do you do about it? Here's the thing. If you loved this conversation, you do not want to miss the bonus episode we recorded for Patreon. I asked them to each tell a story from their time at Tesla together. One of those moments where in leadership, you had a line drawn in the sand. You had to make a choice and decide whether or not to step into courage or just to stay silent. And let me tell you, it's raw, it's real, and it's the kind of behind the scenes story you do not get to hear just everywhere. In fact, you won't hear it anywhere else because we didn't have it on the main part of our podcast, but we saved it for this special moment for you difference makers. So if you're already a part of our Patreon community, you'll get to enjoy it. If not, now is the time to join us. Head to the link in the show notes, join us there, and you'll get full unfiltered conversation. Honestly, it touched me so deeply, and I just came away really admiring these two individuals, who they are and why their leadership and what they're saying matters so much, because their story is unique to each of them, but I'm hearing elements of it in so many places and spaces right now that are not only risky for business and government and society and academia, but it's putting humanity and our human-centered approaches to live the life that we all want to cultivate here together on this earth and in our communities and in our workspaces. So much of it is at risk, and their story really highlights that. And I have such admiration for the moments of courage where they decided their values, when they became misaligned, they made some choices to move in the direction that is so admirable. And I have so much respect for the two of them. I know that you will too. Do not miss it. Go to patreon.com/aworldofdifference to join us in this conversation, which will be uploaded there very, very soon. And of course, if today's episode inspired you, please share it with a friend, somebody who might be struggling at work, somebody who's facing a line in the sand in their workplace. Post it on LinkedIn and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss an episode here at A World of Difference with our outstanding guests who bring all their differences around the table to help us make a difference together with them, because courage is contagious. And together we can create a world where leaders choose it every single day. Keep making a difference, keep being courageous, keep leading in the most daring, bold, fully you kinds of ways around the world. Keep your values intact. Don't let them change you. Continue to be who you are and treat others with the dignity and respect that they deserve. You deserve it too. Draw those boundaries for yourself and make sure that your values are clear to you, because these choices are coming every single day, increasingly so. Keep making a difference with who you are, wherever you are all around the world. Okay, difference makers, I know you, and I know when you hear something you really enjoyed and you learned from it, you want to share it. I am like that too, which is why I love to promote guests on this podcast for you to get to hear them yourself. Sometimes they write books, sometimes they write on Substack, sometimes they podcast, sometimes their voice is just every day in the workplace where they live and impact their communities in a variety of ways with all the hats that they wear. So if you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you did, please share it with a friend, a parent, a neighbor, somebody you went to boarding school with back in the day, somebody at work, your boss, people on your team, because this is a message they needed to hear. And it have impacted you. Please give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. It really helps our reach for more people like you to find us, the difference makers, the listeners, the leaders, the people in your communities that are making the world a better place. I appreciate you so much. Has life ever thrown you a curveball? I've been thrown 1, 2, maybe 3. And okay, if we're being honest, a few more in life. And sometimes you just need a professional to talk with it about. And friends help and family helps, but having a professional therapist has been a game changer for me because of the skills they bring into those conversations. And I want you to have access to that too. So BetterHelp, I have been willing to give you 10% off your first month if you sign up today with www.betterhelp.com/difference. You deserve to have somebody walking through this with you. You deserve all the healing. And a professional is the kind of person that will not only listen, but they will give you tools to walk through this journey so that you are not alone. www.betterhelp.com/difference to get 10% off your first month today.